Hey guys, what's up? It's the Culture Detective here, investigating your favorite albums. I just had dinner, and before dinner, I just did a movie review on a fantastic movie. But, I also planned to do an album review, like yesterday. But, I didn't feel like doing doing two album reviews yesterday, so I moved this one to today. So, yeah, today I'll be doing a classic album review video where I review an album that is very important to the history of music, and also a very famous album, also a very successful album, a very talked about album. Um, yeah, Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, and Bitches Brew. Yes. So Miles Davis is a jazz musician, world famous jazz musician, trumpeter, and composer and band leader, and he has made quite a lot of jazz albums and performed in a lot of jazz pieces, and his music has always been some of the most seminal and influential in the realm of jazz. Now, as far as jazz goes, I am no expert by any means. I have not listened to enough jazz to call myself an expert at all. Not even call myself a moderate fan. In fact, I'm only beginning to dabble into jazz. And of course, where is a better point to start off at dabbling into jazz than Miles friggin' Davis? Yeah, I listened to Kind of Blue in Bitches Brew as well as In a Silent Way, and I thought these albums are also extremely good, but all distinctly different from one another. So we'll start off by talking about Kind of Blue from 1959, which is a long, 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 long time ago. And by a long time, I mean 62 years. 62. Holy crap. Um, Yeah, the oldest album I've ever talked about in this channel is really the Beatles' Revolver, I think. And now this is way back, because Revolver was what, 1966? This is 1959. This is extremely old, but Kind of Blue is essentially widely considered as the greatest jazz album of all time. And it is cool jazz, it is modal jazz as well, meaning that it is kind of laid back, relaxed, smooth, not chaotic at all, kind of good, straight edged, and just very disciplined. And apparently, this is not representative of Miles Davis's career at all, because Miles Davis has never been into just one jazz style. He had hopped from one jazz style to another, to another, to another, depending on what is very popular back then for jazz, or what will be popular at jazz. He's just always spearheading. He's just always at the head of the curve. And Kind of Blue is fantastic, I have to admit. It has 5 tracks. So What and Freddie Freeloader, the first 2 tracks, sound pretty much exactly the same, with the same tempo, the same rhythm, a really nice bouncy bass at the bottom. We have some really clear and smooth, high definition trumpets and saxophones on top, nice crispy drums, and very relaxed overall. Even more relaxed would be the 3rd track, also the shortest track on the entire album, Blue in Green, which ventures a little bit into spiritual jazz where things really, really slow down. And it's the subtlety and the really soft instrumentation, not only on this track, but on the rest of the album, Kind of Blue, that really makes this the definitive cool jazz, modal jazz album. The track All Blues picks up the pace again with more improvisation and more spaciness, and the album ends off with flamenco sketches, which is a very poetically beautiful album ending. And yeah, I will have to listen to this album so many more times to dabble into the more detailed bits of the album. But so far, I absolutely love this album. I am giving it a decent to strong 9 out of 10. But really, the real star of the show of this video is Bitches Brew from one decade. Actually, over a decade later, released in 1970, Bitches Brew. And Miles Davis' jazz style has changed drastically within the course of the 11 years between Kind of Blue and Bitches Brew. And Bitches Brew is so much more chaotic, flamboyant, unstable, intense, crazy, and incredibly inaccessible. In fact, I think a year or 2 years ago, I was like, you know what, I'll get into jazz music. So I listened to this album and I was like, what the heck? I totally did not get it because back then I haven't listened to enough music. I don't know what's going on. I just didn't know how to appreciate this album. But a month ago, I went back to this album and I actually began to enjoy a lot of the bits and pieces of this album. Now, this album is very inaccessible. Very, very, very inaccessible. You're not going to enjoy this album if you haven't really heard of any jazz or much jazz at all, but I recommend In a Silent Way, which is released a year before Bitches Brew, and it will definitely warm you up for Bitches Brew, because In a Silent Way is like Bitches Brew, but also very different in that it is subtle, it is way more contained. It only has 2 tracks. We have the Shh, Peaceful, and the title track, and both of these tracks are very mystical, and in a way you get these shuffling hi-hats, the strangely irregular descending electronic keyboards, and also certain shots and trumpets, but they're few and far between. They're very scant, and overall it sort of builds a very strange, mystical, almost uncomfortable and unnerving atmosphere while having a lot of class and style, which is really interesting, and it perfectly builds up to the chaotic double LP masterpiece that is Bitches Brew. This is widely considered as one of the greatest jazz fusion albums of all times, because this one sort of infuses avant-garde jazz with rockier elements as well, with electronic guitars and drums as well. There's a lot of guest features on this album. I don't know a lot of them, but they're all really important to the jazz scene of the 60s and 70s, and all of them coming together in one album. It's crazy, 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 crazy. There's also a lot of post-production as far as jazz album goes. There's echoes and sound delays and all that stuff. There are 2 drummers on the album, 3 electronic keyboards, so we got layers of sound upon another, just stacked. And when they want to go chaotic, they go chaotic. They fire on all cylinders, exploding with colors and style. When they decide to go quiet, they go quiet, and it builds a lot of tension. And a lot of people going into songs, they expect a sweet turning point, a conclusive ending, but this is not what Bitches Brew is about. This is not what Miles Davis is about at all, actually, because the songs, the tracks off of this thing, they are like never-ending building tension, and it almost serves as a really strange and odd and quirky soundtrack to something really weird, and that's sort of the aesthetic and the appeal of this album for me anyways. Again, there is a lot of improvisation on this album, but at the same time it's not completely directionless. There are posts from one point to another, but between these points, they're all improvisation. Dueling instrumentals, solos, wild breakdowns, quiet moments. It's all over the place. It's a roller coaster of musical strangeness and oddity. The first two tracks, also side A of the album, Pharaoh's Dance and the title track, are two very solid album openers. Pharaoh's Dance is way over 20 minutes, and it's just a really excessive, never-ending tension kind of track. The bass is very prominent. It also opens off with these mystical keyboards and these constant hi-hats, which really builds to an explosive climactic moment after another. The droplets of keyboards are amazing. The trumpet solo and the sax solos are amazing as well. The title track has a pretty slow build-up with shots of echoey trumpets left and right, and then it builds up and up and up and up, and then it quiets down into something moodier, yet funkier, and not exactly blissful at all. In fact, it is sour, it is strange, and it is mystical. And this track is the longest track. It is 27 minutes long, and it's off-kiltered and unkempt, and I really love that flavor. The next track is Spanish Key, and this is one of the more accessible tracks on the album for me. If you like your songs a little bit groovier, a little bit harder, like it hits harder, then you would like this track a lot, because it is absolutely chaotic, it is fiery, it is insane. You can really hear the double drums on this album and the 3 electronic keyboards just feeding off of one another, fiery, flaming. And in the middle of the track, we get the dueling guitars and pianos. We got a trumpet solo, which is just insane. The way it builds tension and release it, the way it swell, the way it reaches a climax and then falls back down. It's very fluid and animated. The deep, growling, squelching bass clarinet. At first, I was like, what kind of instrument is that? I just hear this very low, bassy note, this instrumental, this sound in the back, and I'm like, what is that? And after some thinking, I think it's a bass clarinet. It's very much a woodwind. The track John McLaughlin is surprisingly short, at only 4.5 minutes long, and it is named after the guitar player, John McLaughlin, and he really shines on this track. The guitars on this track, they are flickering, they're skipping around, they're very taunting, and it's a technical masterpiece as far as the guitars go. And the track Miles Runs the Voodoo Down is also one of the more accessible tracks, in my opinion, again with the hard grooves and also the saxophones, which sounds like birds chirping for some reason, because of how they go up and down in a very almost oscillating way. The album originally ends off with Sanctuary. Then, when this album was reissued, they added Feo as the ending. But Sanctuary is the original album closer. It has some really nice skittery drums, echoey horns. The intro is surprisingly slow and sleepy, and the meat of the track is oddly mystical, with the keyboard sort of ringing around in the back. It's really cool. And the track Feo is pretty much the moodiest and the most toned down track compared to any other tracks on the album. The rolling drums, the hi-hats are amazing. The saxophone solo is way more atmospheric, but I wouldn't say contained. It's still very off-kiltered and very unpredictable, which I really love. It's like all of the instruments on this album have a life of their own. They're all having conversations, bickering, laughing, living, chatting on this album, and there's just a sense of rhythm that is not rhythm on this album. That's what makes it kind of cool for me. So yeah, highly recommend this album. My favorite track on Bitches Brew, I really don't know. I really don't have a specific favorite track or least favorite, because I pretty much love all the tracks equally. That goes for Kind of Blue as well. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. Again, every single track is amazing. Every single track is great, and it has a lot of life and a lot of personality in all the instrumentation. And yeah, defining jazz album. What can I say? Feeling a 10 out of 10 as well. Yes, I'm giving two tens in one day. Also, Kind of Blue is a strong 9. I said that already. So, have you listened to Miles Davis music from 1 to 10? How much did you rate it? Like and subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching. I want to review more classic albums in February. I'm thinking The Cure, or Have a Nice Life, Death Consciousness, or Nick Drake's Pink Moon, or My Chemical Romance with The Black Parade, um, or Outcast, or DJ Shadow.